The man's laughter was a whip crack in the hushed, elegant dining room. It was loud. It was ugly. It was aimed directly at Maya Washington, who stood frozen, a cheap restaurant-issued pen still clutched in her trembling hand. On the leather billfolder at her feet, where he had thrown it, a single deliberate stroke of ink mocked her, a large, ostentatious zero on the tip line. "Here's a real tip for you, sweetie," Harrison Sterling sneered, his voice dripping with condescending amusement for the whole room to hear. "Stop wasting your time on broke old losers and focus on the people who actually matter. People like me." His friends, a pack of sycophants in tailored suits, chuckled along with him. Maya's face burned with a humiliation so hot it felt like a physical fever. Her eyes darted around the room, meeting a sea of staring faces, flickering phone screens, and a few pitying glances that felt worse than the open scorn. She was a bug under a magnifying glass, powerless, worthless, a zero. But what Harrison Sterling didn't know, what no one in that room could possibly comprehend, was that the quiet old man he had just called a broke loser, the very man Maya had shown a simple, human kindness to, was about to teach him a lesson about who truly mattered. And the price of that lesson would be his entire billion-dollar empire. Let me take you back to the morning before everything changed. The day had started like every other day for Maya Washington, with the shrill, insistent scream of a cheap alarm clock set for 4:30 in the morning. Darkness still clung to the city like a shroud, but for Maya, sleep was a luxury she could rarely afford. She silenced the alarm with a tired slap, the plastic groaning in protest. For a moment she lay there, the familiar weight of exhaustion pressing down on her bones. It was a deep, soul-crushing weariness, the kind that came from working 2 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, and carrying the world on shoulders that felt far too narrow for the task. She was tired. She was broke. She was 28 years old and felt 80. Slowly she swung her legs over the side of the lumpy mattress, her bare feet meeting the cold, cracked linoleum of her bedroom floor. The apartment was small, a 3rd-floor walk-up in a part of the city the tourist brochures never showed. The paint on the walls was peeling, a faded yellow that seemed to have absorbed decades of other people's sorrows. A persistent drip from the kitchen faucet provided a constant, maddening rhythm to her life, a tiny metronome counting down the seconds until the next bill was due. And the bills were always due. She padded quietly into the living room, which also served as a bedroom for her grandmother, Eleanor. The old woman was asleep, her breath a soft, shallow whisper in the pre-dawn stillness. A framed photograph on the nightstand showed Eleanor years ago, her smile wide and vibrant, her eyes full of a fire that life had since tried its best to extinguish. A sudden, fierce wave of love washed over Maya, so potent it almost brought her to her knees. This was why she did it. This was why she endured the endless shifts, the aching feet, the condescending customers, and the gnawing anxiety that was her constant companion. For Eleanor, her grandmother's illness had come on suddenly, a cruel thief that stole her strength, her memories, and their savings. Maya had dropped out of her social work program at the community college, just 1 semester shy of her degree, to become a full-time caregiver and breadwinner. Her dream of helping others, of making a real difference in the world, was now buried under a mountain of prescription copays, overdue rent notices, and the relentless pressure to just survive another week. In the tiny kitchen, she flicked on the light, which flickered twice before deciding to stay on. She opened the refrigerator. The sight was bleak. A half-empty carton of milk, a single egg, a wilting bunch of celery, and a Tupperware container holding a small portion of chicken and rice. That was for Eleanor's dinner. For herself, Maya pulled out a packet of instant noodles. As the water boiled in a dented pot on the stove, she performed her morning ritual. She opened her worn wallet and took out the cash inside. A 10, a 5, and 3 singles. $18. $18 to last until her paycheck on Friday, which was 3 long days away. A familiar knot of panic tightened in her stomach. That had to cover gas for her ancient, sputtering car, a copay for Eleanor's new medication, and maybe, if she was lucky, a loaf of bread. She ate her noodles standing over the sink, staring out the grimy window at the sleeping city below. The taste was bland, papery, the taste of poverty. But as she ate, she performed her other, more important ritual. She closed her eyes and forced herself to find one thing to be grateful for. It was a practice Eleanor had taught her as a child. "Even on the darkest day, baby girl," she'd say, "there's always a little speck of light. You just have to look for it." Today, the light was the fact that Eleanor had slept through the night without coughing. It was a small thing, but it was enough. It was a shield against the despair that was always scratching at the door. After cleaning up, she got ready for her first job, a 6-hour shift at a greasy spoon diner where the tips were meager and the customers were surly. She pulled on her faded uniform, the fabric thin and worn. She slipped her feet into her work shoes, the only pair of closed-toe shoes she owned. The soles were so thin she could feel every crack in the pavement, and a hole was beginning to form near the little toe on her right foot. She'd stuffed it with a bit of cardboard, a temporary fix for a permanent problem. Before she left, she crept back into the living room and gently placed a kiss on Eleanor's forehead. The skin was as soft and fragile as old paper. "I love you, Grandma," she whispered. "I'll be back this afternoon." Eleanor stirred, her eyes fluttering open for a moment. "Be good, Maya," she murmured, a phrase she'd said every day since Maya was a child. "Be kind." "I will," Maya promised, her voice thick with emotion. It was a promise she intended to keep. It was all she had left. The diner shift was a blur of burnt coffee, sticky tables, and demanding orders. She moved on autopilot, her smile a practiced mask, her body a machine of efficiency. She earned $17 in tips, a little less than usual. After her shift, she rushed home, the engine of her 1998 sedan rattling like a can full of rocks. She had just enough time to make Eleanor lunch, administer her midday medications, and change into her second uniform before heading out again. Her evening job was a world away from the diner. The Gilded Spoon was one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, a place where the city's elite came to see and be seen. The chandeliers dripped with crystal, the tablecloths were crisp white linen, and a single entree cost more than Maya earned in a week. Working there was a strange form of torture. She was surrounded by opulent wealth, serving people who spent more on a bottle of wine than she paid in rent, all while the eviction notice on her own apartment door felt like a ticking time bomb. She arrived for her shift, the stark contrast between her life and this one hitting her as it always did. She walked past gleaming luxury cars, their owners handing keys to valets without a second thought. She entered through the back, the service entrance, where the glamour of the front instantly evaporated into the chaotic, steamy reality of a restaurant kitchen. The air was thick with the smell of sizzling butter, garlic, and the faint, metallic scent of stress. Her manager, a perpetually stressed man named Mr. Davis, barked at the staff during the pre-shift meeting. "We have a full booking tonight, people. That means no mistakes. Harrison Sterling has a reservation at 8. I want him treated like royalty. His table is a top priority. No screw-ups. A murmur went through the staff. Sterling was a notorious customer, a volatile mix of extreme wealth, massive ego, and a cruel streak a mile wide. He was known for being a terrible tipper and a verbal abuser, especially to the female staff. Maya's station was in a quieter corner of the dining room. She preferred it there. It was a small pocket of relative calm in the storm of fine dining. As she polished wine glasses, her co-worker Jessica sidled up to her. Jessica was a veteran waitress, cynical and sharp-tongued, but she had a soft spot for Maya. "Heard you got the Sterling table later," Jessica said, her voice low. "My condolences. Just keep your head down. Say yes, sir, a lot, and don't expect a dime." The man once made a busboy cry because his water glass had a fingerprint on it. Maya just nodded, a familiar dread settling in her stomach. "I'll be fine. Just focus on the tables with the corporate cards, honey," Jessica advised, patting her on the shoulder. "That's where the real money is. Don't waste your energy on the small fish." The first hour of her shift was a whirlwind of activity. She served a young couple on their anniversary, a family celebrating a graduation, and a table of quiet businessmen. She was good at her job. She was attentive without being intrusive, warm without being familiar. Her smile was genuine, a reflex born of her innate nature, rather than a strategy for a bigger tip. She moved with a practiced grace, her exhaustion hidden behind a veneer of professional calm. Then he walked in. He wasn't a big fish. He wasn't even a small one. He looked, to the discerning eyes of the Gilded Spoon staff and clientele, like a man who had wandered in by mistake. He was elderly, perhaps in his late 80s, with a kind, wrinkled face and eyes that seemed to hold a gentle sadness. He was dressed in simple, clean, but obviously old clothes. A tweed jacket with worn leather patches on the elbows, a pair of gray trousers, and comfortable-looking walking shoes. He held a worn, flat cap in his hands, turning it over and over nervously. The hostess, a young woman named Chloe, looked him up and down with a barely concealed sniff of disapproval. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her tone suggesting he might be looking for the restroom. "A table," the old man said, his voice quiet but clear. "For one, please." Chloe's eyes flickered toward Mr. Davis, who was already striding over, his face a mask of polite irritation. "Sir, we are fully booked this evening," Mr. Davis said smoothly. It was a lie. Maya knew for a fact there were 2 open tables in her section. The old man's shoulders slumped slightly. "Oh, I see. The person on the phone said, well, perhaps I was mistaken." He looked disappointed, a little lost. He started to turn away. And in that moment, Maya saw something that no one else did. She saw the loneliness in his eyes. She saw the hope he'd had coming here, and the quiet embarrassment of being turned away. He reminded her, just for a second, of her own grandfather before he passed away, a decent man who just wanted a nice meal out. Something inside Maya, that core of compassion that had survived every hardship, refused to let him walk away. She stepped forward, breaking the unspoken rule of restaurant hierarchy. "Mr. Davis," she said, her voice steady, "I actually have a cancellation. Table 42 is free." Mr. Davis shot her a look that could curdle milk. It was a look that said, "You will pay for this." But in front of the old man, he couldn't argue without causing a scene. He forced a tight, artificial smile. "Ah, yes, of course. My mistake. Right this way, sir." He led the old man to the smallest, most undesirable table in Maya's section. tucked away near a service door. As the old man sat down, Jessica walked by, shaking her head. "What are you doing, Maya?" she whispered harshly. "That's a prime table. You just cost yourself at least a $50 tip. Davis is going to have your hide." "He just wanted a meal," Maya whispered back, grabbing a menu. "He's going to order a soup, drink tap water, and leave you $2 and a pamphlet," Jessica predicted. "I've seen it 100 times. You're too soft for this job." Maya ignored her. She walked over to the old man's table with a warm smile. "Good evening, sir. My name is Maya, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." The man looked up, and a genuine, grateful smile transformed his face. "Maya," he repeated softly. "That's a lovely name. Thank you." He opened the large, leather-bound menu, and Maya noticed him squinting, holding it far away from his face and then close up. He was clearly struggling to read the small, elegant font. Without a second thought, Maya reached into her apron pocket and pulled out the cheap pair of reading glasses she kept for herself, for moments when exhaustion made the order tickets blur. "Here," she offered gently. "Would these help?" The old man looked at the glasses, then up at her, his eyes wide with surprise. A flicker of something profound, something more than just gratitude, passed through his gaze. He took them hesitantly. "Oh, my dear, you are very kind. I seem to have forgotten my own." He slipped them on, and his face relaxed as the menu came into focus. "Much better. Thank you." He ordered, just as Jessica had predicted, one of the least expensive items, the cream of tomato soup, and a glass of tap water. But Maya treated him as if he had ordered the most expensive tasting menu. When she brought his soup, she also brought an extra basket of warm, crusty bread with a side of herbed butter. "The kitchen made extra," she lied with a smile. "Thought you might enjoy it." His eyes twinkled. "I believe I will." Over the next hour, between serving her other tables, Maya found herself checking on him more than necessary. She refilled his water without being asked. She stopped to chat, asking him about his day. He was a man of few words, but he was a wonderful listener. She found herself talking about her grandmother, about her dreams of being a social worker. She didn't know why she was telling him this. It was unprofessional. But he had a way of looking at her that made her feel seen. Not as a waitress, not as a uniform, but as a person. For the first time all day, the mask slipped, and the real Maya, the one who cared deeply about people, was there. He listened intently, his gaze never leaving her face. He asked her questions, not about the menu, but about her life. "Social work," he said thoughtfully. "That is a noble profession. It takes a special kind of person, a person with a strong heart. I hope I can go back to it one day," Maya said, a wistful note in her voice. "I have a feeling you will," the old man said, his voice holding a strange certainty. It was then that the doors of the Gilded Spoon swung open with an obnoxious force, and Harrison Sterling made his entrance. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted instantly. A nervous tension filled the air. Sterling was not a large man, but his personality filled every corner of the room. He was dressed in a suit that was just a little too shiny, his hair slicked back, a diamond-encrusted watch on his wrist that caught the light and threw it back in arrogant flashes. He was followed by 3 other men, all of whom had the same look of smug entitlement. "Davis!" Sterling bellowed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Where's my table? And get me a bottle of the 96 Lafitte. Now." Mr. Davis scurried over, his posture a study in obsequiousness. "Mr. Sterling, welcome, welcome. Your table is ready right this way." He led them to the large central table he had been saving, right next to the small table where the old man was quietly finishing his soup. Sterling stopped short, his eyes falling on the old man. A look of utter disgust twisted his features. He turned to Davis. "What is this?" he demanded, gesturing dismissively at Maya's customer. "I thought this was an exclusive establishment. You're letting in the riffraff now?" The old man didn't react. He simply took a slow, deliberate sip of his water, his eyes calm. Mr. Davis began to sweat. "My apologies, Mr. Sterling. A last-minute seating. He'll be leaving shortly." He shot a venomous glare at Maya, who felt her blood run cold. "See that he does," Sterling snapped, before settling into his chair with a huff. The next hour was hell. Sterling was everything the rumors said he was and more. He snapped his fingers to get Maya's attention. He sent back his steak twice, claiming it was overcooked the first time and undercooked the second, though she knew the kitchen had prepared it perfectly. He complained about the temperature of the wine. He spoke to Maya not as a person, but as an inconvenient piece of furniture. Through it all, he kept casting disdainful looks at the old man, who was now just sitting quietly, observing everything. Maya maintained her composure, her professional smile plastered on her face, but inside, she was seething. The injustice of it was a bitter pill. Here was a man who had everything, treating everyone around him like dirt, while a kind, quiet man like her other customer was treated as an inconvenience. Finally, Sterling's meal was over. He pushed his plate away and loudly declared, "Check!" Maya brought the bill, her heart pounding. The total was over $2,000. She placed the leather folder on the table and began to retreat. "Not so fast," Sterling called out, a malicious glint in his eye. He had been watching her all night. He'd seen her kindness to the old man, the extra bread, the gentle conversation, and he'd decided to make an example of her. He picked up a pen, made a great show of looking at the bill, and then looked directly at Maya. "You know," he said, his voice loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "I'm a great believer in teaching people lessons, important life lessons." He gestured with his pen toward the old man. "You've spent half the night doting on that charity case over there, wasting your time, your energy, my time and my energy, since I'm the one paying your salary." Maya stood frozen, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She could feel dozens of eyes on her. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "Good service," Sterling continued, savoring the moment, "is about recognizing who matters. It's about prioritizing power. You prioritize the powerful, you get rewarded. You waste your time on the powerless. Well, you get what you deserve." With a flourish, he uncapped the pen and drew a large, aggressive 0 on the tip line. He underlined it twice. Then he scrawled a note beneath it. "Learn who to serve." He closed the folder and didn't hand it to her. He tossed it. It fluttered through the air and landed on the floor by her feet with a soft thud. A collective gasp went through the nearby tables. "There you go," he said, and then he let out that horrible barking laugh. "Here's a real tip for you, sweetie. Stop wasting your time on broke old losers and focus on the people who actually matter. People like me." His friends laughed with him. The sound was deafening in the suddenly silent room. Humiliation, hot and sharp, pierced Maya's heart. Tears pricked at the back of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give him the satisfaction. Her body trembled, but she held her head high. Slowly, deliberately, she bent down to pick up the folder. Her movements felt stiff, robotic. As her fingers closed around the cool leather, she felt a profound sense of isolation. No one was helping. No one was speaking up. The manager, Mr. Davis, was hovering near Sterling's table, a pained but placating smile on his face, terrified of upsetting his wealthy client. Jessica was watching from across the room, her face a mixture of pity and "I told you so." Others were just staring, their phones held up, capturing her lowest moment for their social media feeds. She felt stripped bare, her dignity shredded in front of a room full of strangers. She was just a waitress, a nobody, a zero, and he was Harrison Sterling, a man who could crush her without a second thought. And he had. Just as she straightened up, a new voice cut through the thick, uncomfortable silence. It was quiet, but it carried an undeniable weight. "I believe," the voice said, "that you have something that belongs to my friend." Every head turned. The old man, the broke loser, had stood up. He had taken off the reading glasses Maya had lent him and was carefully folding them. He placed them on his table and walked slowly, deliberately, toward Harrison Sterling. He was no longer a frail, nervous figure. His posture had changed. He stood tall, his shoulders back, his gentle eyes now holding a glint of cold, hard steel. Sterling scoffed, looking him up and down with open contempt. "Your friend? This little waitress is your friend?" He laughed again, though it sounded a little less confident this time. "What do you want, old man? Looking for a handout? Maybe she'll give you a cut of her big fat $0 tip." The old man didn't even glance at Sterling. His eyes were fixed on the manager. "Mr. Davis," he said, his voice resonating with a newfound authority. "My name is Abramson. Abe Abramson. Does that name mean anything to you?" Mr. Davis's face went blank with confusion. "Abramson? I don't believe so, sir." At that moment, another figure detached himself from the shadows. A man in an impeccably tailored dark suit who had been sitting alone at the bar all night, nursing a single club soda, stood up and walked over. He moved with the silent efficiency of a man accustomed to power. He stopped beside Mr. Abramson. "Perhaps," the man in the suit said, his voice calm and precise. "You know him as A.J. Abramson, the founder and sole chairman of the Abramson Hospitality Group." A deathly silence fell over the restaurant. The Abramson Hospitality Group. It wasn't just a company. It was a global empire. It owned hundreds of the world's most luxurious hotels, resorts, and, as of a recent acquisition 6 months prior, the entire chain of Gilded Spoon restaurants. Mr. Davis's jaw dropped. The color drained from his face, leaving it a pasty, sickly gray. He looked from the old man's worn tweed jacket to his calm, commanding eyes, and the horrifying truth dawned on him. "Mr. Abramson," he stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak. The owner?" "The very same," Abramson said quietly. "I like to visit my properties from time to time, anonymously, to see how things are really run, to see who my people truly are. Tonight has been exceptionally illuminating." All eyes now swiveled to Harrison Sterling. The smug, arrogant smirk had vanished from his face, replaced by a mask of slack-jawed disbelief. His ruddy complexion had turned the color of chalk. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "No," Sterling whispered, shaking his head. "No, that's not possible. This is a joke. It's a trick." He looked at his friends for support, but they were already inching their chairs away from him, their faces pale with panic. They looked at him like he was radioactive. Abramson finally turned his gaze upon Sterling, and the gentle warmth was gone, replaced by an arctic cold. "A joke, Mr. Sterling? I assure you, I am not laughing." He took a step closer. You see, you wanted to teach this young woman a lesson about power, about who matters. It seems, however, that you are the one in need of an education. The man in the suit, who Abramson introduced as his legal counsel, Mr. Chen, pulled out his phone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Mr. Sterling, Chen said, his tone flat and devoid of emotion. You are the CEO of Sterling Innovations, correct? A publicly traded company. What? What does that have to do with anything? Sterling stammered, his bravado completely shattered. Your company recently secured a 9-figure line of credit to finance your latest acquisition, Chen continued, his eyes on his phone screen. A line of credit extended by the Merchants International Bank, a bank which, as of last quarter, is a majority-owned subsidiary of Abramson Financial. Sterling looked like he had been punched in the stomach. He swayed on his feet. Furthermore, Chen went on, relentless, to secure that loan, you leveraged a significant portion of your personal stock portfolio. And in your quarterly report, you projected massive growth based on a new technology partnership with a company called Omnitech. So? Sterling croaked. Omnitech, Abramson said, picking up the thread, his voice like the chipping of ice, is another one of my companies, a private one. And I just read an email from my board, sent about 30 seconds ago, informing me that our partnership with Sterling Innovations has been terminated, effective immediately, due to, let's call it a crisis of character in your leadership. A low groan escaped Sterling's lips. He stumbled backward, bumping into his table. A wine glass teetered and fell, shattering on the floor with a sound that seemed as loud as a gunshot in the silent room. And the loan, Abramson said, delivering the final, fatal blow. The 9-figure line of credit from my bank? I am exercising the discretionary clause in your contract. I am calling it in. Every single dollar. Payment is due in full. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. It was a death sentence. There was no way Sterling could produce that much capital in less than 12 hours. Not without the Omnitech deal. Not without his stock value, which was about to plummet into oblivion the second the market opened. He was ruined. Utterly and completely ruined. In the space of 5 minutes, his entire world had been dismantled by the very man he had dismissed as a broke old loser. Sterling's knees buckled. He sank into his chair, his head in his hands. He was shaking uncontrollably. Please, he begged, his voice muffled. Please, Mr. Abramson. I didn't know. It was a mistake. I'm sorry. You're not sorry that you were cruel, Abramson said, his voice cutting through the man's pathetic whimpers. You're only sorry that you were cruel to me. You were not mistaken. You were arrogant. You judged a person's worth by the cost of their clothes, just as you judged this young woman's worth by her station in life. You are a bully, and the world has no place for bullies like you. Abramson then turned his attention to the petrified manager. Mr. Davis, he said, you are a coward. You stood by and allowed a member of your staff to be humiliated because you were afraid to lose the favor of a wealthy customer. You valued his money more than her dignity. You have failed as a manager and as a human being. You are fired. Mr. Chen will have security escort you from the premises. Davis opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He simply nodded, his face a mess of terror and regret. The entire restaurant was transfixed. The patrons who had been recording Maya's humiliation were now recording Sterling's complete and utter destruction. The schadenfreude was thick in the air. Justice, swift and brutal, was being served. Then, Abramson did something unexpected. He turned to Maya, who had been watching the entire exchange in a state of profound shock. Her mind was reeling. The old man, the kind man she'd shared her glasses with, was one of the richest men in the world, and he had just defended her. He had destroyed her tormentor on her behalf. His eyes, when they met hers, were soft again. The icy judge was gone, replaced by the gentle man from before. "Maya," he said softly, "I am so deeply sorry that you had to endure that. No one should ever be treated that way." He looked at the trembling wreck of Harrison Sterling. "What do you think, Maya?" he asked. "What is a fitting punishment for a man like this?" The entire room leaned in, waiting for her verdict. Would she demand vengeance? Would she gloat? She looked at Sterling, this small, broken man who had seemed like a giant just moments before. She felt no triumph, only a deep, sad pity. She thought of her grandmother's words. "Be good, Maya. Be kind." She took a deep breath and looked Abramson in the eye. Her voice was quiet but firm, and it carried through the silent room. "I don't want to punish him," she said. "He's already punished himself. I think people should be kind to each other. I think a person's worth isn't in their bank account or the clothes they wear. It's in how they treat people, especially the people they don't have to be nice to. That's all." A single tear, a tear of relief and release, finally escaped and traced a path down her cheek. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a single person began to clap, then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire restaurant erupted in thunderous applause. It wasn't for Abramson's power or Sterling's downfall. It was for her grace, for her simple, profound decency. The sound washed over her, a wave of validation and support that healed the raw wound of her earlier humiliation. Abramson smiled, a real, warm smile that reached his eyes. "Well said, Maya. Better than I could have said it myself." He reached into the inner pocket of his tweed jacket and pulled out a checkbook. It was a simple, personal checkbook, not a corporate one. He uncapped a pen. "First," he said, "let's address the tip that Mr. Sterling so pointedly denied you." He wrote quickly, his handwriting surprisingly neat. He tore out the check and handed it to her. "This is for the disrespect you endured tonight, and for your grandmother's medical bills, and for a new car, and a down payment on a house. Consider it a bonus for being the single best employee I've met in the last 10 years. Maya's hand trembled as she took the check. She looked down at the number written on the line. Her vision blurred. She blinked, thinking she must be misreading it. $250,000. $250,000. It was more money than she had seen in her entire life. More than she could have dreamed of. The number swam before her eyes. The eviction notice, the medical bills, the clanking car, the hole in her shoe, all of it, in an instant, wiped away. But Abramson wasn't finished. "That," he said, "is the short-term solution. I have a long-term one in mind as well. You told me you wanted to be a social worker, that you wanted to help people." Maya nodded, unable to speak. "Good," he said. "Because as of tomorrow, this restaurant is permanently closed. I'm donating the property. I'm starting a new charitable foundation. It will be dedicated to providing housing, health care, and social support for the elderly and low-income families in this city. It will have an initial endowment of $5 million to get started." He paused, his eyes twinkling. "And I need someone to run it. Someone with a strong heart. Someone with integrity. Someone who understands that kindness is not a weakness, but the ultimate strength." I want you to be the director of that foundation, Maya. Maya gasped. Me? But I don't have my degree. I don't know how to run a foundation. We will pay for you to finish your degree and any other education you desire, Abramson said dismissively. You will learn. You have the one qualification that can't be taught: character. Your starting salary will be $200,000 a year, plus benefits. You will report directly to me. What do you say? Tears were streaming freely down Maya's face now, but they were tears of overwhelming, incomprehensible joy. She looked from the check in her hand to the kind, smiling face of the old man who was offering her not just a job, but her dream. Her life, which had been a daily struggle for survival, had been completely and irrevocably transformed in a matter of minutes. Yes, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, thank you. Oh my God, thank you. No, Maya, Abramson said, his voice gentle. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Thank you. He had one last piece of business. And the foundation, he announced to the room, will need a name. It will be called the Eleanor Washington Foundation, in honor of a woman who clearly taught her granddaughter what it means to be a truly wealthy person. At the mention of her grandmother's name, Maya finally broke. She sobbed, a deep, cathartic sound of grief and joy and gratitude all rolled into one. The applause in the room started again, louder this time, a sustained roar of approval. In the corner, Harrison Sterling, forgotten and irrelevant, was quietly escorted out by security, a ghost leaving the scene of his own demise. News alerts were already beginning to flash on people's phones. Sterling Innovations stock plummets in after-hours trading. CEO Harrison Sterling under investigation. His ruin was swift, total, and exquisitely public. 1 year later. The autumn sun shone brightly on a brand-new building in the heart of the city. A large, elegant sign over the glass doors read, "The Eleanor Washington Foundation." A crowd had gathered for the official grand opening. On the dais stood Maya Washington. She was no longer wearing a waitress's uniform. She was dressed in a smart, professional suit, her hair styled, her face glowing with a confidence and purpose that had been there all along, just waiting for its chance to shine. Beside her, in a wheelchair, sat Eleanor Washington. Her health had improved dramatically in the world-class private care facility Abramson had arranged. The worry lines on her face had been replaced by a serene, proud smile as she watched her granddaughter. On Maya's other side stood Abe Abramson, looking dapper in a new tweed jacket, his eyes filled with paternal pride. Maya stepped up to the microphone. "A year ago," she began, her voice clear and strong, "I was serving tables, wondering how I was going to pay my rent. I believed then, as I believe now, that kindness matters. But I thought it was a quiet thing, a personal thing. I've since learned that kindness, when put into action, can be a powerful force for change." She gestured to the building behind her. "This place, the Eleanor Washington Foundation, is kindness in action. This is a place where no one will be judged by what they have, but by who they are. It's a place for hot meals, for medical checkups, for legal aid, for a warm place to sit. It's a place for dignity." The foundation had already made a seismic impact. It had housed dozens of homeless seniors. It had funded a mobile health clinic that served the city's poorest neighborhoods. The story of what happened at the Gilded Spoon had gone viral, inspiring a national conversation about service industry workers and common decency. Several major corporations, shamed into action, had instituted new ethics policies, unofficially dubbed the Maya Rule. mandating respect and dignity for all employees. After the ribbon was cut and the applause faded, Maya walked her grandmother and Mr. Abramson through the new facility. It was bright, clean, and filled with people being treated with care and respect. In the community dining hall, Maya paused. She watched as a young volunteer patiently helped an elderly man who was struggling to read the menu. A quiet echo of that fateful night. Later that evening, as Maya was leaving, her new, reliable car waiting for her, she passed a small grocery store. Through the window, she saw a young woman at the checkout, her face etched with panic. She was frantically digging through her purse, her groceries half-bagged. The cashier looked impatient. The line behind her was growing. The young woman's shoulders were slumped in defeat. She started to tell the cashier to put some items back. Maya knew that look. She knew that feeling. She had lived it 1,000 times. Without a second thought, she walked into the store. She approached the register and, without saying a word to the young woman, tapped her credit card on the payment terminal. The transaction went through instantly. The young woman looked up, her eyes wide with confusion and then dawning gratitude. I don't understand," she stammered. "Why?" Maya simply smiled, the same warm, genuine smile she had given Abe Abramson a year ago. "Everyone has a tough day," she said softly. "Looks like you could use a little light." Before the young woman could protest or even properly thank her, Maya turned and walked out of the store, leaving the woman staring after her in stunned silence. As she got into her car, Maya felt a profound sense of peace. The money, the foundation, the recognition, it was all wonderful. But this was the real reward. The ability to be someone else's miracle. The power to continue the cycle of kindness that had so miraculously changed her own life. She had learned the most important lesson of all. True wealth is not something you acquire. It is something you give away. And in giving, she had found she had more than she had ever dreamed.